here with Dwight Garner, as you know, and we'll introduce him in a second, give more people time to arrive, and in the time, for the time being, announce some upcoming virtual events, more virtual events. On Monday, we'll have Wright Thompson talking about his book Pappyland, which is really taken Square Books by storm. It's kind of incredible. And on Tuesday, Stuart Stevens, some of you may know that name. He's written a book called It Was All a Lie. He's a native Mississippian who spent, I think he worked on 5 different Republican presidential campaigns, and he sat out this most recent one and was very much involved with the Lincoln Project. And he will be interviewed by a political science professor at the University of Mississippi, Marvin King. And so that'll be a good show with some interesting post-election observations, I'm sure. And then on Wednesday, the great novelist Charles Baxter has a new novel, and he will be here same time with Bill Cusimano, the great bookseller from Square Books, who's a Michigander and probably the world's #1 fan of Charles Baxter. That's going to be a great discussion too. So more stuff to look forward to. Thanks for checking in with us, Dwight Garner. Oh, you've got a picture of it on our screen, but here it is, Garner's Book of Quotations. This is his book. I believe, Dwight, this is your first book?
Well, I did a little book about a decade ago, an art book called Read Me, which is an anthology of early book advertisements.
Right. I remember that. He has been a senior editor of New York Times at Book Review from 1999 to 2008. He has been, I think, probably ever since he learned to read, a prolific reviewer of books for a variety of publications, in addition to the New York Times Magazine, Harper's, The Nation, Village Voice. He began writing book criticism for the Village Voice while he was still an undergraduate student at Middlebury. He's a native of West Virginia, and I'm so happy that he's done this book. He's, as I say, just an amazing reader. And one of the things that he's done, he says in his preface to the book, is underline books. I grew up being taught it was a sin to write in your book, so I never did. And I wish that I had. Dwight had the sense to ignore that rule, and as a result, he's been able to mine the material that he's read and reviewed over all these years, and has picked out just some incredible stuff, some fun stuff. It's a quotation book, unlike Bartlett's or the Penguin Book of Quotations or the Oxford Book of Quotations, all those sorts of things. This is, I would say, Dwight, kind of a personal thing. He's picked things that he likes, and he likes the best, and some of them are very witty, and some are very profane, and they're all amusing. It's just I got an advance copy of this book, Dwight, and I was disturbed because I didn't realize until I got the finished copy that it has an index of the writers. The early copy did not, and I was driving myself crazy going through the book trying to identify which writers were where, because they're not grouped together. There is some arrangement. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I kind of wanted it to read like a poem to some degree. I wanted the quotes to flow into one another, to play off of each other. And I think, in moments it almost gets there. Other times it might be a bit more hit and miss. But, a commonplace, as you know, is a more personal version of a book of quotations. It's what one reader decides to put in his or her book and to write down. And books were very scarce. I mean, centuries ago, people you might get to have the book for a day or two, and you would just jot down things. You could have those pages yourself. And in the decades and centuries since, I mean, Virginia Woolf kept one, Auden kept one, E.M. Forster's was published after his death. J.D. McClatchy, the poet, did one, and a lot of them have been done by sort of nobodies, but bright, funny nobodies. I mean, in England, it's kind of a tradition to do these, and a couple of guys in England wrote really good ones that are kind of cult items now.
You've got an amazing breadth and variety of writers that you've read. I made a few notes. Many one would expect to see here: Updike, Trollope, Joyce, Eliot, Philip Roth, Emily Dickinson, Beckett, Brautigan, Auden, Toni Morrison, Saul Bellow, etc., and some great stuff from them. On the other hand, you've got Charles Wright, Muriel Spark, Clive James, Stanley Elkin, Eve Babbitts, and Sally Rooney, who I had to kind of study up on a little bit. She's just 29 years old.
Yeah.
So tell me, was there any, did you try to spread things around in any sort of deliberation? Did you get through with the first draft and realize you were missing certain people, certain things? How did you work at this?
Well, not really. I mean, Richard, my main goal was to not use the typical people. I'm just so tired of, every quote has to be by Einstein or Lincoln or Twain or
right.
Oscar Wilde or Woody Allen or Fran Lebowitz. These people that are always in the quote books, and a few of those people are in my book, but not many of them. I feel like we need some new quotations. We need some new. I walk into a bookstore sometimes, and I've not been in your bookstore for a long time, but I'll walk into one, and they'll have literary quotations on T-shirts and mugs, and I think, really, that's the best quotation you can find? Come on, let's have some new stuff. I want some new phrases out there to talk about. And so I tried to find. I leaned hard on new voices, and this book is taken from my own commonplace book that I've kept for 40 years. And this book is a small, very small selection of what I have. And so going through it, I look for things that would sort of chime off one another and let generations speak to one another.
By my estimation, there are about 2,000 selections in this book. What do you think you have above that in your own commonplace books?
Oh, it's 50 times larger, 60, 70, 80 times larger. I keep quotations about all kinds of subjects. It's kind of a nerdy habit, isn't it? But I try to pick only fresh herbs. I'm tired of the dried herbs, and I keep them in sections that are some of the obvious ones, like happiness and love and whatever work. But I also I like stuff like vomit, masturbation, revenge, envy, lust, pain. I'm tired of most quote books give you these quotes that are about how to succeed or how to do better in love, and I just want to sort of have a book that kind of leaves those behind for a while. My book has some uplift, but there's also a lot of self-hating in there.
Well, you use a Walt Whitman quote. His complaint of gloved gentlemen's words, preferring instead unhemmed latitude, coarseness, directness, live epithets, words of opprobrium, resistance, and you've got all that in there. How am I gonna? I want to be able to recommend this book to everybody, Dwight, but some people might not like some of that stuff.
Yeah, no, I had to warn my mother a little bit, and a part of me fears the lovely 9-year-old kid who's going to the library to get a quote for his social studies book or a social studies paper. He brings this book home, and I don't know. Maybe it'll be a great thing. Maybe it'll open up to the world of literature.
Yeah. And I also got caught up on how frequently certain writers were quoted, and sort of kept a tally on some of that. I don't know what I did with that sheet, but it's interesting how many some of your favorites. I mentioned some of those: Murdoch, Updike. 20. Both of those you've got 20. You used 21 quotes from them.
Really?
Yeah. And of course, keeping score at home, Faulkner 9, Larry Brown 4, Barry Hannah 6.
And they're all great.
They are good.
The people that I think I leaned on the most heavily that might not be well known, and I actually had to pull some out because I liked them too much, were Stanley Elkin, who wrote this novel called The Dick Gibson Show, who I think is just an American genius. And a lot of the great quotes are here are Elkinisms. And Eve Babbitt's, the California LA writer who has come back into prominence recently, but her books are so funny and quotable, and I love them. And I should say right off the bat that it's not important to me necessarily that a good writer be quotable, because many of the best aren't, but I do like ones that are.
And again, I kept finding myself reading from the index, searching for writers. Why? So, I guess you couldn't really group quotations by writer. That would have destroyed your structure otherwise. I imagine that once you put it together, did you feel like you had holes? Did you feel like there were writers that you had missed in through your reading life that you needed to get to? Or
I'm trying to think if I went back. I mean, I might have, and I went back to look. Sometimes I would have a section of quotes on a theme. It would need one more or one, two, and go looking for them. But as you know, and a lot of people know, like it's hard to find a good quote. I mean, the internet is the worst for that. And as I say in my intro, I mean, I love the major books of quotations like Bartlett's, but they necessarily contain a lot of sort of canned material. I mean, they have to go back, and you have to have a penny saved is a penny earned in there, and all kinds of quotes like that. And I just wanted to get to the stuff that's sort of my own heart sing, not to cover the waterfront necessarily, but to have just a lot of really lively or profound stuff that kind of felt like it belonged together.
So what are some of your favorites?
Oh man, that's hard. I love the phrase, Cy Twombly, of course, the Southern artist. He was quoted in Sally Mann's book, and I use this quote in here. He refers to his own death as closing down the bodega. And I just thought, man, that's just great. And then right next to that, I've got a great critic, and Crim just refers to the this profuse upstairs delicatessen of mine. And I love the idea, the bodega, the delicatessen. I mean, both of them are great quotes that I love.
Well, here's some that I particularly liked. Of course, Dorothy Parker, also eminently quotable. If you want to know what God thinks of money, just look at the people he gave it to.
Yeah. And then go ahead.
And Kenneth Rexroth, of course, who said, "I've had it with these cheap sons of bitches who claim they love poetry but never buy a book." I think the first time I encountered that quote, I immediately made a bookmark out of it and gave it out selectively. But
you have good taste in quotations.
George Eliot, few things hold the perceptions more thoroughly captive than anxiety about what we have to say.
It's true. I mean, I have a fair number of public speaking quotes in there because I hate public speaking. I'm one of those people who walks up on stage, and I've seen you speak many times, and I know how brilliant you are at it. I walk on stage in front of an audience, and immediately my face turns bright red, and everything in my mind vanishes, and I end up just blabbering and walking off stage. So I no longer do it, and I've just learned that this is my cross to bear. So I could be here now with you, but I just never again. So I'm interested in things. In a way, this book is an index of my interest to some degree.
George Eliot's, at least Middlemarch, is a personal favorite, or has been for a long time, and you quote from that liberally. somebody ruined that for me. I'm trying to remember. His father taught English at the University of North Carolina. I'm not thinking of his name, but his son was here at the University of Mississippi, and he said Middlemarch could be summed up in 4 words. Oh no, Dodo. And Virginia Woolf, no need to hurry, no need to sparkle, no need to be anybody but oneself. That's a good one.
It is a good one.
Yeah.
Virginia Woolf has a lot of stuff in here. Yeah, no, she's worth talking about in terms of stuff she said. And she kept a commonplace book. I mean, she her inner writing style was sort of epigrammatical.
There was one that kind of threw me off. Václav Havel. He who fusses about a mosquito net can never hope to dance with a goat. Did I just not get? Am I just?
No, I'm not sure I get it either. It fit with. I recall now. I was moving through a section about dancing, and I've got some good quotes, I think, about dancing. I've got John O'Hara saying he's the best dancer among the literati, and I've got Shakespeare, and I've got Zora Neale Hurston saying, verily thou shakest a wicked ankle. I've got this whole set of quotations about dancing. Then I've got this crazy quote from Havel about dancing with a goat, right? And I don't know, it felt like the thing to do.
I wondered what that was. Well, I think maybe if there are questions from the audience, we would love to entertain those. But anybody want to put Dwight on the spot and try to test him with a quote? See if he can guess who said what.
I do worry about becoming a quote bore. Because I'm at the point now where name a subject and I've probably got a quote about it, and my wife's going to start to knock it off.
I see someone's already asked the same thing I have. What's your favorite quote you feature?
I'm sure there are other ones. I mean, I've got some quotes. I've got a lot of quotes about criticism in the book, and one of them is from Jonathan Safran Foer's most recent novel, Here I Am. And it's 2 lines. This is dialogue. And someone says, and the book is critically acclaimed. The other character says, those who can't teach Jim acclaim, which I think is hilarious. And then I've got quotes. Then someone else says, I think it's Cocteau says, whatever they criticize you for, intensify it.
I liked Saul Bellows' "Lead Me Not into Penn Station."
Yeah. And I liked, God, I'm blank, Gil Scott-Heron, who says, when you played there, at Madison Square Garden, which is in Penn Station, you sound like the Knicks, if you're a band, which is so true. The acoustics are horrible. Yeah, a lot of quotes about New York City, a lot of quotes about food, a lot of quotes about drinking. I'm trying to think what else. It's pretty broad, I think.
Well, I marked one of your dancing quotes from Cormac McCarthy. What man would not be a dancer if he could?
I'm sorry I didn't get my favorite Cormac quote in there. I can't believe I didn't, which is 3 moves are as good as a fire. And I've been moving around a lot lately, and happily. But someone asked me if I still have my original book that I kept my quotes in when I was in high school, and I don't, because you move as often as I did, and it wasn't a particularly fancy book. It was just like legal files, and anyway, but it's gone. So there we are.
Dang.
Not metal enough.
I've got from Larry here. This quote from Fay. His novel, Faye, don't say what you would or wouldn't do, honey, because one day you might have to. And also from Big Bad Love, I didn't want to see anything worse than me befall her.
Oh, I miss Larry Brown.
Yeah.
It's funny, there's a real famous Larry Brown quote out there. And if you Google Larry Brown quotes, it'll come up almost first. And I can't remember it now, but it's a really good line, and it turns out not to be true. And our mutual friend Johnny got that at the last minute in my manuscript, so I owe one to him. But yeah, missing Larry Brown.
Oh, oh. Well, let's see. When did you start underlining? What kind of reader were you as a youngster?
I was pretty maniacal, you know. I started reading real young, and I read a lot, far too much. And in high school, one day, I remember underlining something in one of those typical high school books, Salinger or Steinbeck or something. And when you're young and pretentious, which I'm sure I was, it's always the stuff like the moon hung over the water like a song kind of crap, and you underline these, I mean, this is a Pat Benatar line, but love is a battlefield, man. Oh, it's so true. Underline that. And as you get older, as I got older, the quotes started getting better, and I sort of I no longer like the obvious quotes, and I sort of go for the off-brand stuff, I guess you would say. But it's funny, my wife can't read. She gets real upset because we get a lot of books in the house. When you're a critic, people send you books, and I read them first, and I underline the hell out of them, and she can't read them. She has to buy them again because it's annoying to read someone else's underlinings.
Yeah.
Are you an underline?
I am. The funny thing is I'm pretty good about underlining in galley copies, these advanced copies we get, because there's not really a resale purpose. The reason I don't underline in books is because for the same reason your wife doesn't like it, I want, they might have a life with another owner. And
I was thinking today about the book I want to read the most. Well, and I first thought I want to read Richard Howorth's Memoir, which is true. That is way up there. But then I also thought I want to read an oral history of Square Books with everyone who's ever worked there and come to read, and that's if I were an assigning editor somewhere, that's what I would assign. I would read the hell out of that book.
All right. Well, I'll get to work. How long did it take you to put this together?
Well, shit, my whole life. I mean, depending. But
I mean, once you committed to doing the book, how long did it take you to?
Yeah, somewhat. It's funny. I reviewed in the Times a commonplace book by the late poet J.D. McClatchy. And in it, I guess I must have seemed like I knew a fair amount about commonplace books, because an editor came out of the blue and said, hey, if you ever have one, I'd love to talk to you about it. And that sort of got my mind going. And I started dumping some favorite quotes out and arranging them. And this was maybe 2 years ago. And then maybe 3 years ago. And then about a year and a half ago, I had Galassi, pre-COVID. Remember lunch? I had lunch with Jonathan Galassi, who's the head of FSG for our Strauss and Giroux. And I just mentioned it in passing. It wasn't like I was asking him to publish it. He was just asking what I was working on. And he sort of got the thing immediately, and I sent it to him. And it was very rough then, but he saw it immediately. And I did a whole year's work after that. And frankly, the hardest part about doing this book was checking the facts. I mean, quotations, you can go down a deep hole trying to check a quote these days. I mean, a lot of stuff isn't available online. It's blocked somehow, or you can't find it on Google Books or on Amazon. And I had a fiasco. I don't want to go into this, but I hired a fact checker and paid them a lot of money, and they somehow fact checked the wrong thing. I can't even. It's like remembering a car crash now. But so this past Christmas, my children were visiting me, and I was living in West Virginia. I'm working on a book that's kind of a memoir about my childhood, and kind of a look at the way people view mountain people, in culture and in music and in film and in theater. And I just remember my kids came home for their breaks, and I forced them to sit with me in this coffee shop for 6 days straight. And all we did was check quotes. I mean, we just sat there and had a factory, and we checked every quote in the book. And I'm sure there are still, I mean, God knows there have to be an error or two, because some things are just, almost unknowable. But whenever I couldn't get something exactly, I wrote attributed after it.
Oh, I noticed that several times, and I thought that must have meant that it had been heard from reported by someone else, but not provable or whatever. So
yeah, that's basically it. Sometimes I wrote it down in my book, and then I went back years later to find it, and I couldn't. So I kind of feel like I know it exists, but I just couldn't prove it. And I lost a couple of good ones that way. I didn't want to take the chance,
Now, what if you attributed something to a writer who's no longer alive, no longer alive? Who is going to dispute it?
True, true. But a lot of people are still alive. I mean, that's one thing I love about this book, frankly, is that there's a lot of young writers in here. Otessa Moshfegh and Ben Lerner and Sheila Heti and Catherine Lacey and a lot of young poets. Kevin Young, the great poet who just edited that Library of America anthology of African American poetry. He's in there a lot, and I really enjoy his poetry because he's a serious man with a large intellect, and yet he really rakes around in the common stuff of life, and spare ribs and everything. And he's just really fun to read him on any topic.
Yeah, I remember several of those in there. That he's good. And Jonathan Galassi, that's excellent. He's such a marvelous publisher. He's done such great work for a long time now.
Yeah, he's a mensch. I got to say, I mean, FSG, I feel like when FSG publishes a book, there's a really good chance, really, really good chance it's going to be worth reading. And you can't say that about every publisher these days. I mean, there are a lot of good publishers out there, but FSG, I think, keeps their standards really, really high. So I'm honored to have a book with them.
But I'm disappointed to understand that editorial assistants are not the people who run down the sources and do. You have to hire your own.
To be fair to FSG, they did put a lot of work in after the fact, and they did try to check a lot of things. But it was incumbent on me. They made very clear that I had to do the first heavy round, and I took that seriously. So I went nuts. I mean, I really lost my mind for about 2 weeks trying to, because like I said, I hired this person. I thought I was done, and then it wasn't done. And so, but it was probably good for me. No research is really wasted time.
Someone wants to know, and I have the same question myself, will there be a volume 2 or 3 or 4 for that matter?
Well, probably not, because I use so much, but I'm in such pain. I always read about novelists who've turned their books into poets and immediately want to revise them. And ever since I turned this book in, I find the most amazing stuff, either in my own notes or somewhere else. I just can't believe that that's not in the book. So if I did issue a revised volume that I added some good stuff to, but I don't know. It'd be hard to do a second book. I won't say never, but it took me 40 years to do this one. If I take another 40 years, I'll be 95. What's the writer who's been the oldest who's written a really good book? Has anyone written a good book? I guess, of course, Diana Athill, the editor in England, wrote Stet when she was over 90, I think. But good books over 90 are fairly rare. Don't you think?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Well, Roth wrote pretty much to the end. I don't think he made it to 90. Wasn't he like 88 or?
Yeah.
But he wrote those excellent short books, in the later years of his life that I think are really good.
Yeah.
Another question here. What is the most important requirement of a book reviewer? What does it take?
Wow. It takes having read a lot. A lot from, and it takes being really cognizant of a lot of areas to sort of be an instant expert on many things. I mean, I review a lot of novels, but I review a lot of books about other things too. I think it's important it's important to me to remain welcome at people's breakfast tables. And what I mean by that is I want people to pick up a review of mine and with at least a little bit of anticipation. I want them to think, well, this is going to at least perhaps brighten my day a little bit. Maybe there'll be some wit. Maybe I'll learn something, but it just won't be a massive gruel, as are so many book reviews. I mean, I'm not trying. They're great book reviewers. I'm not saying that I'm especially elite book reviewer in this country, because there are many I love. But the standard can be pretty low sometimes for book reviews, and what you get is 10 paragraphs of plot summary, and it just. I knew when I was starting out, when I was young, I didn't want to be that person who wrote 10 paragraphs of plot summary. And so I hope that I bring, something of a voice that's my own, and that it's at least, entertaining to encounter on the page, I guess I would say.
I guess, and I guess having done it, so long for so well, you're probably you can do it much faster than you did certainly 20 years ago, I'm
Oh
guessing.
man, I've got this muscle. I can write 1,000 words. I can write 1,000 words about your vest in 20 minutes if I had to. Because you get this muscle down. Although I will say, I work really hard in preparation for my reviews. I mean, some weeks I do 1 review a week now. I used to be 3 every 2 weeks, and they've cut us back to 1 a week, which is a little bit more pleasant schedule. But some weeks I'll review a first book of poetry, and it's as thick as my finger. And it takes me an hour and a half to read with someone's 5th novel, and I haven't read the first 4. And I feel like it's incumbent on me to go read the first 4. And that's a big week for me. And I take very serious notes. It takes me a long time to type them up. I usually spend the day before I write typing all those notes up. Kind of in the morning, I've got to write a book review for the Times, and I file on Friday mornings. And I've already sort of got all my notes. I'll wake up in the morning, I'll print them out. I sort of know where I'm going, and I'm kind of set up. But yeah, I'll write it in 2 or 3 hours because I'm there.
That's what journalists do. That's what journalists have to be able to do, I think. Write relatively fast.
There was someone did this thing. I think it was at Slate Mag. They had a contest called the Hackathon. And at the Hackathon, they gathered all these great journalists, and they let them look at a piece of paper, or they gave them a book or something to review, but only let them look at it for like 2 minutes. And they each had to write a review in the hour, an hour. They gave them like an hour to write a review of a book that's only for 2 minutes, and it was just.
Much of that was obfuscated, but I think, I don't know about the other people, but I didn't hear much of what you just said. I think maybe if you.
It wasn't that good. Let's keep moving.
Okay. All right. Oh, here we go. Has any writer ever threatened to beat you up?
Yeah. No, but I did have a writer once refuse to shake my hand. This was at a sort of a big event, and I won't name names. No one's come after me. But it is one of the sad things about being a critic is that authors, writers are my favorite people, and I have a lot of writers who are friends. I can't review them, but I can't make any more writer friends because it would hurt them. I mean, if you had a book out and we went out and had a great dinner and like, hey, this is great, let's do it again, Richard, and I couldn't do that because then I couldn't review your book and would want to review your book, and so it's a bummer. I do get a lot of email from writers I've reviewed well. Not always, but I would say 1 in 8 times someone will send me a note, and it's always hard to know how to reply because they'll thank me, and I don't feel like I should accept thanks. I was just as prepared not to like it and to write a negative review. I mean, I wrote the review because your book was great. That's why I said those things. And it's an awkward moment. And I used to be invited sometimes when I was in New York. I have to go back there at some point. But I would review a book and I would get a call, X is in town next week. We're having a private dinner. Come on over and we'll come to the dinner. And I didn't want to do that. I felt like a victory lap. And I don't know. I now understand why critics tend to be quasi-hermits. Because I don't feel like a hermit. I have a good social life, but no more writers for me because I just want to be able to talk about them.
Well, I think we've had a good little chat here. And I'm gonna let you go, let other people go. But first I want to say that this is an excellent book at this time of the year to think of as a gift item. It's for the person, the literary person in your life that you're afraid to pick out any book for. This is the book. So I think it'll make a great gift. I think we're going to have a good season with it, and I thank you for taking the time and the trouble for doing it, Dwight.
Pleasure, Richard. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for sharing.
Okay.
All right, take care.
And we've got signed copies for any of you who want. Thank you.